it's a beautiful bird. Probably, has anybody here besides Becky Agnes, who worked with me this summer, counting the piping plover, anybody else seen the piping plover? Oh, yes. He's,
Robert.
you saw,
Yeah.
Robert saw them in Barbados, wasn't it Barbados? Is that the right island?
Yeah.
And
We've seen them on Lake Diefenbaker
seen
and
them
at
Lake
Chaplain
Diefenbaker,
Lake as well.
Chaplain Lake.
How high do I need to be?
Gabriel's also seen them.
I think there's some big southern there that I think I saw the odd one in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, with the, like there's ducks there and they,
Yeah.
and they come
Yeah.
out of the reed, like I think
Yeah.
I've seen them in there. But
yeah, so I'll just go a little bit over the natural history of the bird. It's called piping plover in reference to its call note, and I'll play you a few calls here. If I can find my app. Every time I add an app, they're in a different spot. Oh, here it is.
You need some light?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Got you.
Piping plover. So it has a number of different calls depending on this situation. The first call I'm going to play is just the little, what they call the piplo call, which is just the call that it gives when you get near the nest here. So as you get towards their territory, they give that little piplo call, which some people interpret as a piping sound. And then, of course, when they've arrived on their territories and they're getting into their courtship, then things get a little wilder here. Kind of a come hither call here, so and then the male, he gets into it and he does a flight song. So he'll get up, fly around kind of in a fluttering motion, trying to attract females. And then if you get near their nest, anybody knows the killdeer?
Yeah.
Similar bird, very closely related. They'll try to draw you away from their nest by pretending they have a broken wing, and they give this call. So they're trying to draw you away from their nest or their young. And then when a couple of piping plovers get together, they might do what they call the encounter call. So there's a bunch of them getting it on, having a social. So they have quite a few different calls, given at different circumstances. So those are the calls of the piping plover. And that's on an app. It's called the Sibley app, which is a really good app for identifying birds. So the piping plover, as you see, this is the male. He's got a big black collar. The females, I'll show you a little later, has a narrow collar. The closest bird to the piping plover in characteristics are the killdeer, which many of you are familiar with. Just about any place like that's heavily cultivated or graze will have piping plovers. Schoolyards, playgrounds, parks, places like that will be frequented by piping plovers. I'm sure there's more than one farmer that's driven around their nest, but they're quite different. Killdeer is much larger. It's also darker. Some people describe the difference in that color as the difference between the color of dry sand here, color of dry sand, and the color of wet sand. Also, the piping plover has one breast band. The killdeer has two. There's another species that's quite similar. It's called the semi-palmated plover, which is a bird that nests in the Arctic. It's very similar in size and number of bands, i.e. one, to the piping plover, but its back color is the color of wet sand. The piping plover is a shorebird. And the shorebirds include a variety of shorebirds, from the very common killdeer to the quite rare black-necked stilt. This bird was taken at a nest at a place called Channel Lake. Do you know where people know where Channel Lake is? It's by Horizon. So when you take the train from Ogama to Horizon, it goes just south of Channel Lake, and there's a road through Channel Lake, and I found this black-necked stilt nest, and you can see there, pointer, what's the pointer here? Anyway, those legs are the legs of the babies that are sheltering under the mother. So her legs are pink, you can see here. The pointer...
It's right in the middle there of the green light.
Oh.
The button in the middle of the
Oh, I
green
just
there.
pushed the, oh,
Yeah.
hey. Hey, I like it. Anyway, that's the adult's pink legs, bubblegum pink. And then those are the babies sheltering under the mother. So all you see is these legs. It's the strangest looking thing, you know. But I had to put this picture in because it's an example of the about 30 kinds of shorebirds that we have in Saskatchewan. All kinds of shorebirds with different lengths of bills, different lengths of legs, and they feed on different parts of the shore, like right from the driest part of the shoreline right to the deeper water. Now this is a female. You can see how narrow her collar is compared to the male. You remember the male his collar is quite broad and black, whereas this one's quite narrow. And this is their habitat. This is what they like. You know, stinking alkali sloughs, basically. In Saskatchewan, although they do occur quite frequently on Lake Diefenbaker, which is a very different spot with sandy beaches. And it lays its eggs, it likes gravelly areas so that the eggs kind of disappear in the rocks. So you often find a nest in pure sand. They like lots of rocks to help conceal the nest. This bird might be having a problem because that's a rock. So,
I've never seen
so
that.
they always lay 4 eggs, but the 5th one's a rock. And they thought, well, maybe this is one of the reasons why the bird is getting so rare, because it's trying to incubate a rock. So we took the rock out, by the way, and because we figured that's not a good idea. Leave that rock in, because that rock will never hatch. That bird is still there, trying to hatch those eggs. That one rock. Now here's the range of the piping plover. So as you can see, how important Saskatchewan is in the overall breeding range of the species. You know, it's a little bit, you'll see in the next slide, it's a little bit exaggerated, the size of the range in Saskatchewan, but gives you an idea how important Saskatchewan is to the long-term survival of the species, because about 1/4 of the world's birds nest in Saskatchewan. And they winter in places that I wish, and many of us here wish we were right now. The Atlantic coast, the Gulf Coast, and then more recently they've found them more and more frequently in the Caribbean, and Barbados is down about there, I guess. So that's about as far south as they go. So these, there's 2 populations. There's the Great Lakes prairie population and then the Atlantic population. And the Atlantic population is in more trouble than this population because these birds like beaches, nice sandy beaches, and people like them too. So they have to do things like put up signs and fence off areas to keep people out and dogs out. Whereas the Great Lakes population, which is part of this population, has problems too because of the beaches as well. So they have disappeared from a lot of the beaches in parts of Ontario as well. Whereas in Saskatchewan, they mainly like stinking alkali lakes, and except for Lake Diefenbaker. So there are problems on Lake Diefenbaker with ATVs going up and down the beaches and things like that. And also because Lake Diefenbaker is a reservoir, they've actually had to physically move the nests as the waters rise in some years when they when the reservoir fills. So, next slide is closer up of Saskatchewan. So, this is the shaded areas is where the piping plovers nest. Most of the nesting areas are really actually in south of Avonlea, in what we do people here call it the Codo, Missouri Codo. Anyway, it's basically from here south to the border, and that's a very important area for them, as well as Chaplain Lake, which is here, and Lake Diefenbaker, and then Quill Lakes, which used to be an important area, but isn't any longer. And I'll explain about that in a bit. And then over in Alberta, but Alberta, there are not many birds in Alberta. The real area of importance is this area, as well as these two basins. So also, for some reason, in certain years, these little guys have been found up at Buffalo Narrows, Peter Pond Lake, and way up at Lake Athabasca. So why they do this, we're not sure. It could be that in certain years when there's not enough habitat out in this area, due to drought, or on the other hand, the other extreme flooding, they head north and keep going until they can find some habitat further north. So when it comes to understanding where these birds are, our work is cut out for us, because if they can go this far north, there's a lot of country up there. So this is just a little bit about the history of the bird in Saskatchewan. The first breeding record was Deep Lake, that's in the Capel area. And in 1920 we knew about 5 places where they nested. In 1947, the Chaplain Lake sodium sulfate mine was opened. And this is so important because what they've done there is they brought water in from the Wood River into Chaplain Lake and created a lot of habitat for the piping plover. Similarly, when Lake Diefenbaker was filled, a lot more habitat was created. And going into 1978, we're up to 37 places that they've known to breed or suspected to breed. And then in 1984, the first major survey yielded 802 birds in 16 basins. And then since then, we've had what we call the International Piping Plover Breeding Census, every 5 years from 91 right up to present. And by now, we're up to over 200 sites where they are known to us or suspected of bred now. So we've made a lot of progress in understanding where they occur. And this is just a summary. As you can see here, the numbers have fluctuated. From 1,400 to 2,000, to a low of half as much in 2011. And I'll explain why this has happened. And then, roughly 60 or 70 basins, but declining, where the birds have occurred. And the number of pairs has also fluctuated quite a bit. And the percent has varied from usually around 70%, but in 2011, only 50% of the birds actually were paired. Of the birds seen, only 190 of them, or a total of 380 if you double by 2, were actually paired. Whereas this year, there were more birds paired. So, yeah, surveying though. So this is me out at, does anybody know where Shoe Lake is? Well, it's not much of a lake. It's right by Ormiston. So if you go down to Ormiston and you take the grid road along the railway tracks that go from Ormiston to the community of Wheatstone, or defunct community of Wheatstone, you go right by Shoe Lake. And it's called Shoe Lake because it looks like a shoe. But anyway, this is my first day out, and I walked around the north part of Shoe Lake and got about, I can't remember exactly, but I think I got about 20-some birds, piping plovers. So that was my first day, and then for 2 weeks, from the 5th of June till the 17th, I think it is, for 2 weeks we had volunteers, contractors, and various agencies like Saskatchewan Wetland Corporation Nature Conservancy of Canada, Nature Saskatchewan, various other groups out counting the piping plovers over, I think we covered over 200 basins looking for these little guys. So results. Well, the bad news is that we only saw about a 4% increase over the 2011 survey. Well, we were up 800 birds from 767, so the numbers were up a little bit. As you can see, the numbers are still below the population peak of 1,464 birds in 2006. And that's kind of our management target. Like, that's what we'd like to see in the province. But getting there is another problem. So, due to widespread flooding, few piping plovers are recorded in the northern portions of its range. So places like Red Berry Lake, north of Saskatoon, or Krill Lakes have no birds, and yet those are very important areas historically for the species. So as I say, for the second consecutive survey, no birds were found in Big Krill Lake. A lake that has hosted as many as 435 birds. And so you can see one of the reasons why we're not anywhere near that numbers, because if Big Krill Lake's out of action, then we have a lot of birds that are unable to use that lake for nesting. So this is what Big Krill Lake looks like. So that's what the shoreline's like. So even if the water did drop, there's driftwood all over the shore, and those birds won't go there. So I think what we'd have to do to get the birds back to Big Krill Lake would be have to have parties out, have lots of bonfires, lots of beach parties, lots of free beer, and get the teenagers out there and start burning that wood, because otherwise we ain't going to get any birds.
What date's the first one?
Where do we sign up?
Yeah.
Well, have we got too much water now or too little water?
Too much water at the... Yeah, so here's the good news. Well, the number of birds was actually only up 4%. The number of paired birds was up 45% over 2011, I'm sorry. So there's greater interest. The birds were more interested in pairing up and getting it on. So that was encouraging. And record numbers of pairs were found in several basins, especially the very important Chapel Lake had a record number of 83 pairs of birds. And also the plovers were found nesting on 6 new areas. So we're still continuing to find new places where they had not been known before. And then the other thing is that, as I mentioned, the problem with Krill Lakes is that a lot of landowners and the upper reaches of the Krill Lake Basin have drained their sloughs into the lake, and what's happened is a lot of the landowners around the lake have been flooded out. Anybody's been up to Watson country, it's like Water World. I mean, it's amazing how I don't know what that highway is that goes from Dafo to Watson, but it's just about flooded out. So they've encouraging landowners to, or discouraging landowners from draining their wetlands into the creeks and rivers that drain into the Krill Lakes. Because as you know, the Krill Lakes is what they call an internally drained basin. It has no outlet. It might make an outlet if things did keep going that way. It would go into Last Mountain Lake and into the Capel, bringing with it salt water, and so destroying the fishery and the basically water quality of the whole Capel Basin. So there's a real concern that over and above the piping plovers, that the Krill Lakes do not overflow their banks into the Last Mountain Lake. And one of the interesting sidelights of doing the survey for the birds is looking for color marked birds. So these birds had a bunch of bands on them, and by looking at the various band combinations, we can actually tell where and when the bird was banded, and then that way we can figure out, just how long they live and where they go. Do they stay in the same area? Do they move around? We have to understand all this information, what we call population dynamics, in order to understand just what's causing the birds to increase or decrease, and it's very important to know just how long these birds live, because unlike songbirds, you think that these birds live quite a long time for their size, and maybe 10, 12 years, which is important because there may be a lot of years when they can't nest, and so they have to live a long time in order to bring enough young so that the species continues to exist. And here's another color marked bird. So the first one was at a place called Tribune, which is near just south of Weyburn, and this bird was at Manitou Lake, so it's got a different combination. But you can see the metal band there. That's the band with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife band with the number on it that tells if you could. If the bird, this is basically works if the bird is found dead, whereas these are bird color band combinations that will actually give you an idea where the bird's from without having to catch the bird again. So this going full circle, this is me in 1969 looking for piping plovers. So I've been at it a long time. You can see a little difference in girth here. I weighed about 120 pounds then, and this is a friend of mine. This is Mike Gollop, who also has worked on birds all his life. You might ask what the question why the gun. We used to, back in those days, in the 60s, when you were doing research, a lot of research was done over the barrel of a gun. Birds were collected for the museums and for other purposes. And that's kind of fallen out of favor, collecting birds, but in those days, yeah, my tailor is not the, he's not the best either. Yeah. Well, this is 68, yeah. So this site in the Matador pasture, people know where Matador is, it's near Kyle, between Kyle and Beachy. This site was visited in 1968 and was not visited again until this year.
Wow.
So, they didn't find any piping plovers there this year, but the water was too high, which is a common theme. Just too much water. And the mandatory sunset. This is the sun setting over Big Quill Lake. And as you know enough about now after my talk to know what piping plover is like, and I don't think there's much like here. It's too flooded. So thanks for coming out. I know there's some people who came here from Regina, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
So
And
is
we've
it,
got
is it,
coffee coming.
is it the flooding that has brought in all of the driftwood?
Yeah, it's flooded into the trees. The trees rot and fall into the water, and then they drift around. And yeah, it's a huge lake, and it's good for other water birds, but not for piping plovers.
So which water birds are benefiting from?
Things like pelicans and cormorants and herons and fish-eating birds, things like that.
Lots of geese.
Lots of geese, yeah.
So what's the importance of the plover that you're started this conduct this survey on?
I guess the economic value is probably minimal, but I guess the aesthetic value is probably the main reason why people, are interested in the bird. It's a lovely little bird, and it is much sought after by bird watchers. With perhaps 5,000 to 10,000 birds in the world, we probably here collectively weigh more than the whole population, right? Because what do they weigh? 200 grams? Well, I think that the biomass of us sitting in this room exceeds by probably a factor. Anybody venture to guess? Probably we exceed the population, the world population of piping plovers in our biomass right in this room. Make a long story short. Yeah.
So who sponsors all this study?
Quite a few agencies are involved. SaskPower, Nature Conservancy, Canadian Wildlife Service, Saskatchewan Wetland Conservation, SWA.
Now,
guess
water
what?
security.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Becky. They have a direct responsibility because they have so many of the birds at Lake Diefenbaker. Nature Saskatchewan, sodium sulfate mines, Saskatchewan minerals are involved, yeah. Yeah.
What kind of call does it have?
The piping is the call here. This is the main call. Yeah, yeah. That's the call you hear when you're out looking for them. You're walking along the beach, and then all of a sudden you hear them. You know that you're close to the bird.
What do they eat?
Invertebrates, birds in the shallow water, like various insects, what they call sandflies, probably a lot of them. Becky?
I've seen an adult pick up the spider along the shore.
Oh, spiders, yeah.
Like the
So basically,
land spider.
basically invertebrates, and anywhere from the high water mark into they don't feed too far into the water, but, you know.
When you moved all those eggs in Diefenbaker Lake, I was reading about it and got an interest in it. What was the survival rate? Did they go back to their eggs because the nests had to be moved?
Becky
They
would be.
do. So they've got quite a very technical, well-ran technical system there.
Okay.
So they have 6 summer staff that are dedicated to Lake Diefenbaker each year. They walk the shorelines. They first identify in May where the plovers are, and they watch them as they pair up and as they establish nests. And they're in very close contact, those staff through the Water Security Agency, with Sask Power and Alberta, with knowing about the water coming in from the mountains. And as the water comes in and the water level raises up, they move back the nest to within the threshold of what the adults will allow. So it's usually within that meter range. So every day or every couple of days or a couple times a week, they'll go and they'll actually move the nest back. And the adults actually do have that tolerance to stick with the nest. But they do it slowly over a couple week period.
Yeah, so if you moved it too far, too fast, they would probably lose
Yeah.
sight of the nest. But
Yeah, lots of
Yeah.
trial and error there
Yeah.
over the years.
yeah.
And going back to what Dawn was asking you, like who started it, like the survey every 5 years?
I don't know.
It was
Becky
a
did
joint effort internationally through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Canadian Wildlife Service through Environment Canada, and Cuba and other areas in the Caribbean weren't actually brought in until recent, and because it's over the full year, so the wintering grounds are surveyed in the winter, February, I'm not sure the exact date, and then
the same year, like
and
every
then-
5 years. Oh,
then
okay.
in June it's done through their breeding grounds.
It's the
Including
longest
here.
running comprehensive survey of any shorebird, I think, in the world. It's,
Yeah,
It's the,
in North America for
yeah,
sure.
at least in North America. So it's the only species in North America that's covered both the breeding range and the wintering range over long term. So we have a really good idea.
Which really gives that good snapshot over the long term of where the most critical, the most important habitat for those species are, because it's allowed us to capture various water level years, which really seems to have the biggest impact on especially the Great Plains species. That water level tends to really impact them. So with having now this handful of surveys over the 25 years that we can really see where they're going and really establish where is that most important habitat. So yeah, it's been really beneficial.
So again, about the money,
Yeah.
all these organizations
So there's-
all contribute
right, and then-
into a pool that's
Mhm.
then
Well, it's
divvied
also
up,
up to us. I mean, Nature Saskatchewan facilitates the census in Saskatchewan. Each province and each state, they facilitate. They have people that facilitate it. So here with Nature Saskatchewan, we enlist many funders Financially, we've got private foundations, we've got through Bird Studies Canada, the Bailey Fund, there's places like ELSA, Wild Animal Appeal in Canada, that support it financially, and then various levels of government and in industry that have a stake in it. And you know, financially, it's an undertaking, but beyond that, the bigger undertaking is the people power. And this year, like Al said, there were nearly 100 people that were brought together, and that's from various government and non-government organizations and just volunteers that are extremely keen and appreciated.
How tall are the birds? How their legs? How tall are they with their legs?
Oh, about, what, 6-7 inches? Yeah, not very
Pretty
tall.
little.
Pretty little, yeah, smaller than a killdeer.
So their young would be, when they hatch, it'd be as agile as a killdeer, would they?
Oh, yeah.
They hatch and they're running.
Yeah, they're like little puff balls with like stick legs on them. Yeah, they're cute, and I wish I had a picture of them, but.
Yeah, that's our big challenge here in Saskatchewan with the young. The survival rate of the young is an issue for us because they are those little cotton balls on sticks that about that inch tall, and because they have to feed on their own like from day one, it poses a challenge for them because the first approximately 2 weeks of their life they cannot fly. So if they get stuck in a rut, they're done. So we have a great effort through our Plovers on Shore program and lost stewardship outreach work we do to work with producers that have cattle along shores to ensure that they keep them off during the critical nesting period. It's pretty fantastic that most of our producers, these shorelines are surrounded by a lot of pasture land that they don't utilize generally till the fall anyhow. So that's really allowed to keep a lot of this habitat intact for the plovers. But we do continue to raise that awareness to avoid that because cattle can do a sure number, as well as humans, like Lake Diefenbaker. There's a big effort there to keep humans off because footprints, ATVs, dogs, they're very hard nests is another issue. They camouflage extremely well. You look at the nest and think they're very lazy, but it's actually very very intelligent of them to do that. They camouflage so well from their predators.
The interesting thing about people might ask, well, why do the piping plover have this breastband? And it's what they call disruptive coloration. In other words, when you see this bird sitting on a nest, you don't see an outline of a bird. What you see is a head, and then this black imitates a shadow, and then the other part. So you list to the untrained eye, that bird sitting on the nest does not appear to be a bird because of that black neckband. That's what they call disruptive coloration. It creates an image in your head that it's not really a bird in its shape. But if you're to the trained eye, like we had a guy with us named Ross Dixon, could spot these birds, half a mile away on the nest because he had the search image. So it's really important to develop a search image if you want to look for these birds because of that, what they call disruptive coloration. And the other interesting thing from an artistic point of view is what they call counter shading. This bird's dark here, but the shadow counteracts the effect of the darker back. The shadow of the breast creates a one solid image. So the bird tends to blend in. So the bird is very, can be, except for its call, it's quite cryptic. You don't see them easily until you're right upon them.
What other birds are being studied?
Well, this one is an interesting one because it never nested in Saskatchewan until about 10 years ago. Now they're quite common. So birds change their distribution over time, and so this is one of the species that's really increased in Saskatchewan. It's not common anywhere, but it's becoming more common. And we think one of my theory is that there's been habitat loss in the Great Basin in the Utah area, and so they've they've come to Saskatchewan to nest, and quite successfully in many instances.
How's the killdeer population? Because I used to see oodle of them, and now we still see them around here, but not as many as they used to.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a
They
species
drain the ditches in Avonlea River, that's why.
yeah, they're still reasonably common because they're very adaptable.
Okay.
You know, they do well. Whereas the piping plover is not all that adaptable. It has very specific habitat requirements compared to a killdeer. Killdeer will nest anywhere where it's kind of barren areas. You know, summer fallow. Now the continuous cropping has changed in the agricultural world. We've gone from summer fallowing to chemical fallowing and also continuous cropping. That's changed. Some birds have benefited, like the upland sandpiper. That's another shorebird. Yeah, it does a wolf whistle, and that's a pretty common bird around Avonlea.
Is continuous cropping good for them or bad for them?
Yeah, it's been really good for the upland sandpiper.
Okay, good, we're in all continuous cropping now. I'll admit it now.
So I could play a call of an upland sandpiper. Yeah, you know, if you have any bird questions in general, you got me here, and I can.
Al, I just wanted to mention just about some of the research that's been done this year on other shorebirds. Canadian
Yeah.
Wildlife Service, you were there in the spring at a shorebird workshop, and what species there? Canadian Wildlife Service has been doing some extensive research on some other species.
Like the knot.
Yeah.
Which nests in the Arctic.
Hmm.
And what else?
Because Chaplin is a major stopover for a lot of these.
It's one of the biggest ones.
Right, and that's the sandpiper.
That's the upland sandpiper. Oops, wrong. There's lots of them around here. Lots of them.
I've seen them, I don't think I've heard
And you'll
them.
see them perched on the wires. If you drive between here and Regina, you'll see them perched on the telephone wires. Really strange looking because they have these long legs, and I don't know how they hang in there. But yeah, you know that bird, Blaine? The upland sandpiper. You know that one?
Maybe.
Yeah, I love that wolf whistle.
I missed that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Al, where the birds that are banded, where are they? Are they banded on the wintering grounds or?
They're banded
Or-
all over, mostly on the wintering grounds.
Does anybody band them here?
Yeah, they've been banded here as well.
Who does that?
Nobody lately, but the Canadian Wildlife Service used to band them. Especially at study areas south of town here, between here and Bengoff, in the Ormiston area.
So that bird on the slide there, is that a popular bird around here?
The black-necked stilt?
Yeah.
Not really. They're more in the southwest of the province, but they do occur here. You know, the close relative is the avocet. You know the avocet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're very closely related. And we got lots of avocets around here. It's a great bird. Everybody get coffee? You got cookies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
Very good.
Al, what about Ore Lake? Would there be colony at Ore Lake? That's pretty.
Oro Lake?
Ore Lake.